we see, whether it's Harry Potter or Superman or some kind of figure that we look towards, that they struggle with their own demons. And that is why it is so important that Harry Potter be placed in Gryffindor. The government's second contention is the idea that this will allow for more depth of world building. And again, we see that a point was left unaddressed by the honorable government. The idea that we don't need unnecessary detail into the vast complexities and intricacies of the wizarding world. Again, I point to the members of the audience who are dozing off or on their phone right now. It simply isn't for everyone. And speaking as a student who's currently in AP World History now, I don't need to spend hours more of my life with another history book. I have that in school. This is supposed to be literature, not a history book. We want that kind of strong narrative that my partner described, that is easy to grasp and at the same time relatable and teaches strong messages to our children. That's the kind of narrative that J.K. Rowling attempted to portray. J.K. Rowling herself studied the classics. She studied great writers like Homer and attempted to mimic those kinds of literary strategies with things like chiasmus and great character development. Clearly, we have a master at work, even if it is for books aimed at children. And what she does using her skills, using her knowledge of literature, is create a strong narrative, not a history. The honorable government talked about how when he's in Slytherin, Harry Potter will be exposed to more traditions. But honorable speakers, I ask you, what kind of traditions are we exposing our dear Harry Potter to? Traditions of hazing, bullying, elitism, classism. These are not the messages we want to be sent to our children, because those are the very values Slytherin embodies. Our third contention is the idea that this strengthens Rowling's message about prejudice. We all agree here that within this children's book, you have a lot of great moral lessons about racism. Where we differ, however, is where the House of Slytherin stands. I present to you Slytherin, a secret society based on the idea that a set class, a set race of wizards are better than other individuals. And again, I point you to the fact that these children aren't just sent to these houses. They choose it, as Harry Potter demonstrates with the Sorting Hat. So you have a vast collection of individuals that are choosing elitism, choosing classism, choosing racism. These are clearly not children that we want our kids to be looking up to. These are kids that have made the choice to turn to evil, that have made the choice to be a part of this kind of secret society that is akin to, in our world today, something like the KKK. Because those are the values that Slytherin embodies. Another idea here is that the honorable government keeps coming back to the idea of, well, why can't Slytherin be good? Because J.K. Rowling didn't write it down. It's not in the books. She wanted to show the dangers of evil. She wanted to show how bad character traits such as cowardice and elitism are interwoven, and how it can pose a danger to not only these individuals, but the whole wizarding world and our society as a whole. In response, the honorable government talked about the idea of Severus Snape, and what a great guy he was at the end of the books. However, now it's time to bring up the nerdy spec knowledge of Harry Potter. Snape emotionally and verbally abused his students just because he didn't get the chance to snog Harry's mom. That's not exactly a little bit more nerdy spec knowledge. Harry Potter's mother, Patronus, the kind of symbol of her spirit, was a doe. On the other hand, Harry Potter's father, Patronus, was a stag. Two animals perfectly matched to each other that work side by side. In sharp contrast to this, Severus Snape's Patronus was a dove. That is not love, honorable speakers, that is obsession. And that is not a good character we want to be portraying to our students. That is not a man who should be leading characters and heroes like Harry Potter. Another detail to keep in mind here is Gryffindor has some sick characters, not just Ron Weasley, that Harry Potter would not have come in contact to without the Sorting Hat. And I bring you to Professor McGonagall, the leader of the House of Gryffindor. And to put it eloquently, she's a badass. And there's no way Harry Potter would have gotten as close to this woman had he been in Slytherin with Severus Snape, the supposed hero we have. Professor McGonagall served as a kind of mother figure that Harry desperately needs. He was extremely influential in his character development, providing him advice, encouraging him when it came to sports, his career. He would have never had those opportunities had he been put in Slytherin. Again, I bring you to the ideas my partner brought up here before. Change, champion, and choice. Change, because Slytherin represents the kind of elitism and classism that we find in our own society today. Harry Potter does not embody those ideas. He instead promotes the ideas of altruism and courage that Gryffindor stands for. Champion, because Harry Potter in Gryffindor teaches that leaders are not bullies. They are people that stand up and work with their friends. And choice, because these are children that are choosing to value these kinds of character traits. And Harry Potter is defying the very stereotypes that the honorable government has presented before you. He is told by everyone he deserves to be in Slytherin. And he makes the choice, finds the kind of values that he believes are most important, and chooses Gryffindor. And that is why, honorable governments, you must choose, speakers, you must choose Gryffindor as well. I close, and I urge you to vote with the opposition.
I call this House to order, and I now call on the leader of the opposition to give the first rebuttal of this debate, not to exceed 4 minutes with a 30-second grace period. Renee Cito-Foreman.
So I'd like to start off my rebuttal by getting a little nostalgic. I remember when I was little, I went to my bookstore at midnight to pick up the last Harry Potter book. And I would just like to, kind of talk about the sort of feelings that I had as a child, and I think a lot of you can identify with as well. As a young person reading the book, I was really proud to identify with Harry. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to become the type of person that he became. I was proud to consider myself a Gryffindor. And I think that's very important, to allow children to be able to have this house that they can identify with. This house that they can, try and be a part of and try and embody in their everyday life. And they can do that because they identify with Harry Potter, because he is the protagonist of the book. So another thing that Harry Potter was very important to me for was simply entertainment. I spent a lot of car rides with my parents listening to books on CD, actually, of Harry Potter, which is really great. And I think that's a story for young children, but also for adults, that everyone can listen to, because it has that element of plot, but also the element of complexity that allows us to discuss what we're discussing today. But at the same time, as my partner said, it's not something that's going to put you to sleep or overwhelm you with details of the wizarding world and specific genealogies and histories of everything that's going on. It's something that's going to entertain. It's something that's going to engage every single audience while making sure to remain targeting the younger audience. Now, I'd like to move on and kind of discuss the goal of literature. What does J.K. Rowling want to achieve here? Again, to entertain, but also to challenge beliefs, to show the young people of our world that racism and elitism is not the right way to go about doing things. And Harry Potter does face these struggles. He faces decisions that he has to make, for good or for evil, for or against these ideas. And I think he's really allowed to decides to make the right decision, not based only upon his own decisions, but also upon the people around him. He considers those around him in every decision that he makes. He is a true leader. He becomes selfless through the books. He becomes brave. He becomes the hero figure. And also imagination, because we can create some of this world for ourselves. We are given the good and we are given the evil, and we can imagine countless different varieties and opportunities in between, just like the government is doing here. But at the end of the day, the basis, what strengthens this book, what gives its gravity, is the fact that we have very clear sides, very clear, good and evil to go off of. My partner said, and I completely agree, Slytherin is a warning of what happens when we make wrong decisions. Or not necessarily wrong decisions, but decisions for the wrong reasons. As I spoke about before, Harry makes the decision to choose Gryffindor when he is encountering the Sorting Hat, despite the fact that the Sorting Hat tells him he would be better off in Slytherin. And this is very important for our children, for everyone to learn why we make decisions, not just the results of those decisions. At the end of the day, this is not just a story about Harry Potter the Wizard. This is a story about us. This is a story about all of us growing up and being impacted by the types of literature that we're reading. At the end of the day, speakers, do we want our children to be idealizing a person that is embodied by the negative characteristics that we see Rowling portray through Slytherin House? Or do we want to see our children become members of society that strive for the bravery, for the selflessness, for the being a noble person, being a hero, considering others, not relying upon racism or social standing to find his friends? All of those sorts of things are things we want for our children. And that is why it is essential that Harry Potter is a Gryffindor, for not only the message of the story, but for our generation. Thank you.
I call this house to order, and I now call the Prime Minister, Kate Turner, to give her 5-minute rebuttal, not to exceed a 30-second grace period. Kate, you're ready.
Thank you, honorable speakers, for your final recognition. And I believe at this point in the debate we've heard the resolution and case topic enough times by now, so I'm just going to move straight into my rebuttal. First of all, my partner and I believe that the opposition is being slightly unfair to the Harry Potter audience with a large part of their argument. The audience, as they say, is largely comprised of children. Children, as my partner clearly stated in her speech, they know when they're being talked down to, and they can and do handle issues of immense complexity, as J.K. Rowling also clearly understood in her handling of most of the issues within the Harry Potter stories. By putting these issues, by putting issues of tolerance and prejudice and her messages of acceptance in the context of a world full of dragons and broomsticks and potions, she managed to make them palatable to children, but that doesn't mean she dumbed them down, and it doesn't mean she should have to. Kids can understand complex moral issues. They have to be able to, because someday they have to grow up and face the world. And Harry Potter puts these issues in the context of a children's book and lets them think about them in a way that's removed from the real world, but so that they can and do still understand and imbibe the messages that Rowling intended to give. Now, the opposition speaks of Slytherin as a society completely defined by its elitism, and of, as the member of opposition said, people who choose elitism. But my partner and I would like to remind you, honorable speakers, that when you choose which house you're sorted into, you're 11 years old. And if you're choosing Slytherin House, maybe that's because that's what your parents have been telling you for your entire life. And maybe that's not necessarily a great thing, but why did Ron Weasley choose Gryffindor House? Was it because he actually wanted to be brave and altruistic, or was it because all of his siblings before him and his parents had been in Gryffindor? And isn't that the same thing? Hogwarts is supposed to be the place you go and then you go and learn about it. And maybe that's from within the confines of your house, but you're still able to learn about the world around you and challenge those stereotypes. But if you're told for the entirety of your education that your whole house is evil, that there's never a wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin, then of course Slytherin House is going to band together for protection, because everyone else hates them. Everyone hates them so much because that's what they've been taught. As the opposition said, we're shaped by our environments. And the Harry Potter environment is very much one that vilifies Slytherin House to, frankly, an unreasonable degree. The dichotomy set up by Rowling of Gryffindor versus Slytherin, of good versus evil, is a disservice to the Harry Potter readers because it assumes that they cannot understand complexity, that they cannot understand moral ambiguity, and that's ridiculous. Gryffindor traits can lead to evil just as easily as Slytherin traits can. Bravery doesn't always equate to goodness. Sometimes bravery just equates to stupidity. Ravenclaw traits can lead to evil. Just because you're really smart doesn't mean you'll use that intelligence for the forces of good. Even Hufflepuff can become evil. Hufflepuffs are defined by their loyalty, but that doesn't mean that loyalty is not misguided. Why is Slytherin the only house that we stereotype as evil when all of these traits can be taken and applied to either good or to evil, depending on how you use them? And why was that message not expanded on and developed by Rowling more throughout the course of her series? Perhaps it could have been if Harry had been a Slytherin. If Harry had been a Slytherin, he would have gotten to see the wizarding world as an outsider. He grew up among muggles, but also from the very heart of the wizarding world within Slytherin House, which again, as my partner stated, was comprised largely of purebloods, perhaps, but then again of the people who had shaped and sort of held wizarding culture close to them throughout witch burnings and then into the modern era. World building doesn't equal a history book necessarily. That's not what it is. Every single class Harry was in was technically world building. Every single trip to Diagon Alley Harry took was technically world building, but we loved it anyway because